So, today, a bit of a different video because we're going to go over the plot of the cancelled Batgirl movie. For the longest time, details have been out there, but there's been a little thread on Twitter posted, shout out to Neb there, gathering this summary of what the actual plot of the movie was, and I thought it would be fun to go throughout the details. I know a lot of people like to clown over this movie given what has been said. Was it even going to be good anyway? But regardless, I just thought it would be fun for us to all go through what was going to happen in the story, what was Batgirl's story, what was Brendan Fraser's Firefly story. Of course, we can't forget about J.K. Simmons as Gordon, Michael Keaton carrying on as Batman after the Flash movie. We can't forget this was a whole different direction post-Flash reset, if you will. Now, what's already been said, very briefly as a bit of a recap, about the movie, even by James Gunn and Peter Safran, is that Batgirl's a character that inevitably we will include in our story. On the Batgirl front, it's not about late in the process of the film getting cancelled. I saw the movie, and there are a lot of incredibly talented people in front of and behind the camera on that film. But the film was not releasable, and it happens sometimes. That film was not releasable. I actually think that President and CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, David Zaslav, and the team made a very bold and courageous decision to cancel it because it would have hurt DC. It would have hurt those people involved. I think that they really stood up to support DC, the characters, the story, the quality of all of that. I spoke to Adil and Bilal, the directors, last week. We were chatting. We'd love to be in business with all those folks. Christina Hodgson wrote it. Some people are already back in business with us. As I said, a lot of talented people were involved, but the film just was not releasable. It would have not been able to compete in the theatrical marketplace. It was built for the small screen. So again, I think it was not an easy decision, but they made the right decision by shelving it. And as many of you know, in this process, what Warner Brothers Discovery did is they did a tax write-off of the Batgirl movie, in where I believe they spent $90 million on it, but since they're not releasing it, what they can do, even though they put that money into it, is that they can take that off of their profits for their tax, so they quite simply do not have to pay tax on the $90 million that they spent on the Batgirl movie. But as a result of that, because I'm still seeing some people confused, the reason why they cannot release this movie, even though it was already shot, is because once you write something off for tax, if you're a company like Warner Brothers and you're in the business of making movies, TV shows, you can't take that off of your profits so you don't pay tax on it and then still release it to the world. It's just not how it works. If they did do that, then they would have to pay back the tax that they saved on the $90 million. So let's go through what the plot would have been about and how I feel about the story. Like, does this seem good to me? But I do want to add one more thing in there. Whether you thought this movie was going to be absolutely terrible or not from what you've heard, to be fair, a summary like this still misses out so much context. So it could have still been better, arguably, than whatever I'm about to read out. And by the way, I haven't read this out. Like, I'm reacting to this for the first time. So again, shout out to Neb's Good Takes on Twitter for summarizing this for us. So they say, the plot of Warner Brothers' cancelled Batgirl film starring Leslie Grace, Brendan Fraser, J.K. Simmons, Rebecca Front, and Michael Keaton. This was stitched together from a few different sources, and I've tried my best to make it coherent. However, many details are still missing. So, we start with a young Barbara Gordon in ballet class. She sees the martial arts class through a window and sneaks in. She meets her best friends here, Jason Bard and Elisa Yeoh. With the help of a photographic memory, she uses some moves she saw to take down a bigger kid. Which is true, Batgirl does have a photographic memory. That's been a thing for, I think, decades and decades. So, yeah, I guess she sees the martial arts class, sneaks through the window from a ballet class. She meets her best friends there. And I guess this is what I mean about missing context. Like, I guess the scene would unfold. They said, hey, do you want to be a part of this class? Do you want to spar? And because of the photographic memory she has from maybe observing, she already knew how to conduct those moves. I don't know. But anyway, carrying on. Her mom and dad pick her up from class and discuss if Barbara should be allowed to go on a patrol with Jim. He's uncomfortable with the idea, but eventually gives in, getting Barbara excited. Gordon is almost killed by a gang on patrol, but Batman saves him, which amazes Barbara. And now that's kind of interesting, going on a patrol with Jim Gordon in Gotham City. That is pretty dangerous. You know, I'm not surprised that it made Jim uncomfortable, but they did it anyway, which does make sense because, again, I remember covering this very scene when we had these Batman Michael Keaton shots. Now, this is the same suit from the Flash movie, believe it or not. And yeah, this makes sense. Batman appears, a younger Michael Keaton Batman saves Jim's life, and I guess you would have had again, context missing. No matter what you think about the film, you have to kind of fill in the blanks. Imagine the cinematography here. I guess the camera would have panned on Barbara, maybe being a bit terrified, but then in awe of this masked vigilante. And they'd already set up that she, snuck into the martial arts class, so you can see what they're going for here. But Neb continues to say, later, Jim hears a call over the radio saying his house is on fire. He arrives to see his home in flames and his wife screaming in the window. He struggles to get inside, but his front door, losing my voice, his front door explodes, knocking him out. Barbara walks in and sees a large man before passing out. And we've got some more set photos here. So, wait, yeah, I guess Barbara Gordon, Barbara's mother, Jim's wife, dies in this fire. Cut to many years later. Barbara now works a desk job at the GCPD, with Jim being retired as he suffered a heart attack. She often stays at home to take care of him while also spending time with her best friend Elisa and her boyfriend Jason. Meanwhile, we see Garfield Lynn's Firefly, but at the end of the thread, Neb does mention here that he's actually the Ted Carson version of Firefly. So whenever I guess we see Garfield here, it's actually Ted, who works at a grocery store. And I remember this being filmed as well, but is fired for his temper. He tries to get his old job with the Bresci crime family back, but is rejected by the boss because he's running for mayor. Garfield burns down a pharmacy for his sick wife's meds. Now, this is one of the things that I felt quite bad about with the film, because I'm a big fan of Brendan Fraser. I think he's absolutely incredible. It is fantastic that he's made a big comeback, and I do think he would have been really good as Firefly. Now, a lot of people, like to think of Firefly in a different iteration, saying, oh, is Brendan Fraser really Firefly? But I do feel like in this take, Brendan Fraser would have given it his all, and I think he could have convinced a lot of people that he would have been quite a cool casting. But I do also like the touch of how what is somewhat motivating his backstory here is the fact that his wife is sick. That probably wears him down. Maybe he doesn't make a lot of money. His wife is sick. He's got a bad temper. Then he's at this point, I guess, with all of the missing context that we still don't know, all the in-between shots, maybe getting a bit more into his scenes, then goes to a pharmacy, maybe even has a bit of a disagreement there, doesn't have the money, they won't give him the meds, and then sets this place on fire and walks out with them. Now, Barbara dyes her hair red and attends a Halloween party hosted by Bruce Wayne. She wears a Batman costume while Jim shows up wearing his normal trench coat with a sign on the back saying nudist on strike. It's interrupted by Killer Moth, who brought goons to rob the party. Now, maybe I can see some people having an issue with this. When you look at the picture of Killer Moth there, I can imagine some people looking at that being, not so much of a comic book look, it's just like a tattoo on the back of his head. Now, I wouldn't have expected anyway, this, accurate, Killer Moth look in this movie necessarily, with a gun and the actual outfit, maybe even a Killer Moth helmet. But I can't imagine too many people would have been like, oh, that's amazing, the thug look, bringing along your goons. But either way, Killer Moth shows up with a bunch of goons to rob the party. Now, Barbara drops in from the ceiling and begins fighting the goons along with Bruce, saving his life. Wait, so Batgirl saved Batman's life here? Really? I would love to know the details behind that. Moth escapes, but is incinerated by Firefly, who knew he was on the Bresci's hit list. Garfield takes his grill and brings it back to the Bresci's as proof of his kill, being rehired. So now we have Firefly, Ted Carson, allowed back into that crime family because he's proved his worth. So again, this kind of reinforces with the information we've already learned about Brendan Fraser's Ted Carson Firefly, that he's been trying to live a fairly ordinary life, but he has been involved in things before. But ever since losing his temper, ever since being fired from his job at the grocery store, and then setting fire to the pharmacy, getting his sick wife's meds, he's looking for alternative means to, I guess, lead his life, make money. Saw his opportunity to take down Killer Moth, and now is allowed back in. But another confusing thing is with this video being recorded here, that's like a Christmas party. So I don't see how this is Halloween. I'm not sure if these details line up, or maybe that's what was originally planned. Maybe they changed it to Christmas, but yeah, I don't see how that's a Halloween party at all. It's Christmas decorations absolutely everywhere. And it is pretty cool the way she kind of flops in there and like grabs a hold of the Christmas tree, because it is like rookie vigilante vibes, isn't it? Later, Barbara sees Alicia at her bar. She asks if Barbara dyed her hair red to be like Batgirl, as some other people apparently did after the news of the new hero from the party. She plays along to not seem suspicious, but realizes she loves being a vigilante and saving others. So this was clearly a big thing for Batgirl's first proper appearance in Gotham, I suppose you could say. She saved a bunch of people from Killer Moth and his goons, so I guess it does make sense that people would look up to her, to the point, I guess, of dyeing their hair red. And her friend Alicia is just like, oh, I guess you've done that as well. Now, back at the GCPD, Barbara breaks in to the GCPD evidence lockers using her photographic memory. She sees Harley Quinn's bat from Suicide Squad. Interesting. And that makes sense, I guess, with regards to post-Flash reset. You know, Keaton was staying on. Some things would have been kept, like Harley Quinn, Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, so the bat would have been the same. And the mullet from Birds of Prey. She grabs an old Batarang and also finds Catwoman's cowl, which she uses to make her own cowl. Having now made her own batsuit, Barbara goes on patrol for the first time. She's grappled by Batman, who tells her to stop being a vigilante, and then drives off in his classic Batmobile. However, Barbara is able to steal his grapple gun in the process. Interesting. So what I do like about this so far is that we see in a superhero origin story movie her actually going out on patrol as a vigilante. Now, I don't know if we would have got a bunch of her stopping crime, or if as she just started a patrol, Keaton's Batman grapples her and, you know, tells her to stop. But I do like the idea or the concept of this because, you know, normally in these superhero origin stories, they're caught up in the very thing that even got them there in the first place. It's not really a day in the life of, but clearly Barbara here is trying to do a day in the life of patrol as a vigilante. But that's when Batman gets involved, and I guess she uses the powers bestowed upon her from her Catwoman-made Batgirl cowl to steal his grapple hook without him realizing. So Barbara begins to investigate Firefly. She believes he's the one who killed her mother. In the process, she begins to fall for Anthony Bresci, son of the crime family, who's working to help Gotham's homeless in the sewers. This hurts her relationship with Jason. This is somewhat of a missing context thing, like how did she meet Anthony Bresci? Was it, as Neb says it, when she begins to investigate Firefly, since he's back in that crime family? Maybe through her investigations and scoping out, he bumps into her, but Anthony isn't like immediately hostile. I mean, it seems like he could be somewhat of a good kind of crime family person if he's helping out the homeless in the sewers. Like maybe, you know, that's what Barbara likes in him. Oh, he's from a bad family, but he's not necessarily a bad guy. I don't know if that's the vibe. I don't know how interested I would have been in the relationship side of this movie. But yeah, I think maybe that is roughly kind of what they were going for. And naturally, Jason's just there like, but what about me? Barbara is upset with her dad, as he says he didn't see anyone on the night her mum died. She lights up the bat signal to ask Batman for help, but he inspires her to solve it on her own. Firefly goes to kill Jim, but is stopped by Batgirl, who somehow discovers he was a firefighter. Okay, so Batman responds to the bat signal being lit up, fair enough, but he inspires her to solve it on her own. I mean, is that something Batman would do? I can see like both sides here. Like if Batman was asked about this and he knows that Barbara Gordon is the daughter of Barbara Gordon, but also Jim, maybe you would have thought he would have heard her out and been like, well, Jim's my boy. And like, to be fair, yeah, her case has never been solved. If you've got some information, maybe you could tell me what you know. And if I deem it credible enough of information to kind of look into, I will. I can see Batman doing that out of, you know, friendship for Jim, but at the same time, I can imagine him also seeing this wannabe vigilante and just being like, but at the same time, there is that kind of, not cliche, but this essence of, if you want to prove yourself, I already told you to stop, but I see you're still going. Do this one on your own. And it's maybe obviously a bit of a test by what I assume is the end of the movie, him taking her on to train her. Now, again, a lot of missing context here with regards to Firefly goes to kill Jim, but stopped by Batgirl. Fair enough. I would have liked to have seen those scenes, even like earlier with Jim and what J.K. Simmons could have done in that scene with literally watching his wife burn alive. You know, that could have been quite a scene. And here, you know, Batgirl saving her dad, that interaction of Jim standing there not knowing it's his daughter, that could have been really cool as well. So Barbara investigates Garfield Lynn's or Ted Carson's files and sees they were already taken by Jim, finding out her dad was secretly investigating him too. I like that. It shows that Jim never really did give up, but maybe he just always somewhat hit that dead end to an extent that he never really pinned him and took him back to the GCPD. Now, she confronts the corrupt head of the GCPD and learns that she sent Firefly to kill Jim that night, but Mrs. Gordon was there instead. So yeah, I'm guessing in the flashback or at the beginning of the movie when Barbara was a kid and saw Batman save Jim and then, you know, go back to the apartment and then his wife was there dying. I'm guessing Jim wasn't commissioner, and Jim in the early days of the GCPD, as many of us know, was one of the few good cops, but ruffling a lot of the corrupt cops' feathers to the point of where they sent somebody to kill him, but his wife was the collateral damage. Despite their relationship being tense, Barbara goes to Jason and tells him about all of this while keeping her Batgirl identity a secret. They find out Firefly is going to enact a massive plan to burn down Gotham. If I was Jason, I'd be like, how do you know all of this? Maybe that would have been explored, but she would have been like, my dad, I went through his files and found... There would have probably been a scene like that to stop her revealing her vigilante investigations to Jason. Neb goes on to say here, I'm not actually sure why, but I'd guess his sick wife died. Yeah, and this is what I mean. Again, a lot of missing context, a lot of missing scenes. I suppose after everything, Firefly's thrown away at this point. You know, he lost his job, the pharmacy thing, killed Killermoth to join back to the Bresci crime family, and throughout all of this and his bad temper getting worse and worse and worse, maybe she dies and that just sets him off even more. Just having this huge disdain for maybe the system, Gotham, and he's like, you know what? Let it all burn. On paper, I do think that sounds a bit too typical of a story, but I would be willing to bet that Brendan Fraser's performance would have sold that to make it a lot more interesting, I guess you could say, because right now it's like, you know, my wife died, you know, I'm gonna now burn down Gotham. So up next, Firefly arrives at the mayoral speech for the head of the Bresci family and kills him with fire. Batgirl chases him on her bike, but he escapes as there's fire bursting out from all of the sewer gates. Jason arrives with a fire truck to try and help, but Firefly boards it. I remember this scene being filmed, like Firefly is just on top of it and flames are going everywhere, as you can see in some of these photos. At this point, I'm wondering why Firefly decides to kill the head of the Bresci family, who is running for mayor, I guess. Maybe, again, now his wife is dead. Maybe even though he got rehired by them, they were difficult to him and he just got resentment for them as well. I really have no idea. Jason tries to fight, but Firefly hits him in the leg with an axe. He sprays fire all over the city while Batgirl manages to catch up with him on her bike, and they fight on top of the truck for a bit. Barbara and Jason manage to get off the truck before it crashes into a hole. Now, I hate to be that guy, but at this point, when all of this is happening in Gotham, I do feel like asking, where is Batman? I guess you could say the film could have set that up with how he's dealing with something else much bigger in Gotham. But at the same time, lots of projects these days, they don't always even bother to do that. So I hope this film would have done that, especially considering that Batman has met up with Batgirl a couple of times at this point in the movie. The whole led to a village for the homeless. Garfield, or Ted Carson, is badly injured from the fire truck, and Anthony Bresci arrives with his goons. They hold Batgirl back as he shoots Firefly in the head. What? Now knowing Anthony's role in all of this, Batgirl tells him she'll stop him one day. Wait, so Firefly is just dead like that. Now, I don't like it that often, really, when villains die in a movie. I'm more of the fan who, rather have them put away. For example, Matt Reeves is the Batman. Riddler, I guess you could have argued, could have died at the end of the movie, but he didn't. He goes back into Arkham. Even though we wouldn't have seen probably Brendan Fraser's Firefly again, it's still the headcanon that I kind of like from the comics, and how it's not just that one appearance of them being Firefly, so to speak, and then they're dead. Kind of like Black Mask in Birds of Prey. I just don't always like the appearance and then the death at some point in the movie. We cut to Christmas, where Barbara and Jason have gotten back together and are setting up decorations along with Alicia and Jim. Gordon believes she can go out on patrol with the GCPD now, but Barbara declines, and she uses the database from her desk job to catch criminals. So maybe we would have seen a few scenes of her still taking down criminals, but using the data from her desk job to do that. Barbara has now started to work from an old clock tower, which is pretty cool. Batman arrives, asking if she's ready to be a hero. So again, somewhat cliche here, you've proved yourself. Are you ready to be a hero? Would have been good if we had your help, Batman, because it seems like he doesn't really have much of a presence in this movie. He just would have appeared every now and again, and maybe it would have felt better having seen the movie, because again, as I said at the beginning of this, without actually seeing it, and when you're just reading a summary like this, it just doesn't seem that great, or the ideas just sound relatively very, very straightforward, especially with Batman just coming back saying, "Are you ready to be a hero?" She accepts and is given a new armored suit, but decides to combine it with her old one, keeping the cape and cowl she made from the Catwoman suit. And that's when we saw, after the movie was cancelled, the actual Batgirl suit here that she would have been wearing right at the end, and I suppose in any future role that we would have seen Leslie Grace star in as Batgirl in the old regime's future DCEU, which, as we know, is no longer a thing because that all got scrapped. And we're getting the DCU now. But then it goes on to say Batman and Batgirl have a discussion about how they felt lonely for so long, bonding over their traumatic lives. Barbara and Bruce get on a gargoyle and jump off together, gliding through Gotham City as the ending shot of the film, which I can't deny that would have been a very, very badass shot. But one thing about this is, just imagining this old regime's future direction. I know some people like the ideas of plenty of things because Henry Cavill would have stayed on. We would have got a Man of Steel 2. But, it's hard for me to imagine, like, Michael Keaton staying on as Batman after the Flash movie. Again, like, once the timeline was restored, so the original scene at the end of the Flash movie, instead of George Clooney, it would have been Keaton staying on. This Batgirl movie would have released. So you would have had Keaton's Batman with Henry Cavill, standing side by side at some point. He would have done his Man of Steel 2. I guess we would have had Sasha Calle's Supergirl carry on. It's just not exactly the lineup I would have imagined, or as we all would have thought originally, you would have had Ben Affleck there, or a somewhat younger Batman. But that new universe truly was keeping Keaton on. He was going to train Batgirl by the end of this movie. They probably would have brought more people into the fold. We heard that Keaton was going to kind of be the grandfather-esque role in multiple different movies of the DCEU. Would we have seen him interact with Henry Cavill's Superman? I guess at some point, because at the end of the day, he would have been the Bruce of that DCEU direction, and then it would have eventually gone on to Walter Hamada's teases for a Crisis on Infinite Earths movie. But some notes. Brendan Fraser's performance was as deranged as you would expect for Firefly. He just also happens to care for his sick wife and hates the system for cutting his benefits. Natalie Holt, Loki, composed the score. No idea why there are Christmas decorations at a Halloween party. This movie took place in a new timeline, as we just went over, that the Flash movie's original ending set up, with Bat Keaton replacing Batfleck and Supergirl being alive. A lot of people are saying it sounds average, which I don't entirely disagree with, but it hadn't gone through standard reshoots yet, and David Zaslav didn't want to spend money on reshoots for a streaming movie that wasn't going to make profit anyway. From what I understand, it would have been impossible to legally release the movie in any capacity. As I went over earlier, you can't do that if you've literally written something off for tax, even officially, but I could definitely see some of it leaking during a massive strike. That would be funny. Yeah, you never know. You never know. So my overall thoughts on this is that, look, as I said, in this summary, it does sound like, I've said this whole time, I really don't think it's as bad as what a lot of people run with on social media, saying, oh, that movie would have been absolute, complete, utter garbage, this, that, and the other. I think they could have made something out of it for a Max release. It wouldn't have been a theatrical release. Movies like this usually go through reshoots. They would have test screened it. It didn't get that opportunity, so it would have been padded up from the unreleasable state it was in. And even then, like, they say it's unreleasable, but they had finished shooting, but were only in the extremely early days of post-production. So they hadn't really like started properly putting it together despite all of the scenes being shot. So when we saw it, I do think it would have been entertaining, but I do wonder, and this is something I can't deny, just like what even Neb said at the end there, I don't know if it would have been that special, but maybe given reshoots, maybe some time in post-production, they could have actually made something that people would have still enjoyed. That's not saying it would have been great. That's not even saying it would have been like, it's pretty good. It could have still been like average and like, okay, Keaton Batman, oh, you know, J.K. Simmons is called, and like, this is pretty cool. Brendan Fraser was awesome. Like, it could have been one of those movies. And I mean, for crying out loud, 2 years after shooting, it's on its first day, Aquaman 2 is still getting reshoots as of a couple of weeks ago. So do you see what I mean? Like, that movie is still being completely, you know, ironing out the creases all the time. The amount of reshoots that movie has had. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is just to give you an example of how they've really been taping together and trying to make something of Aquaman 2. I do think something could have happened out of Batgirl. But something we can't forget as well, all of this coincides with what was happening behind the scenes at DC anyway. Even unofficially, they would have known around about this time that the future direction of the DCU canon and story, the future universe post-Flash movie, was going to completely contradict the premise of this movie in the first place. So you can look at it like maybe one of the deciding factors, not like the main one at all, but maybe one of them was like, why are we going to release a Batgirl movie that was intended for the future direction of the DCEU under the old regime, in where Michael Keaton stays on after the Flash? He's now the Batman and Bruce Wayne of the DCEU. This would have been in that universe with Black Adam, Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, the Man of Steel 2, everything like that. It just, on the bottom line, doesn't make sense to release that movie when the whole future direction of DC no longer adhered to the previous DCEU's plans, where they were going to eventually go into Crisis and everything like that. So I know people are just like, you could release it anyway, like, oh, you know, you made the movie, like, just release it anyway. But I do understand from a business perspective, if you're going to start advertising for a Max movie, label it a DC Batgirl movie, and it's got Keaton in it because he survived from the Flash movie. That's why they reshot the end. It might confuse some people. Again, I'm not saying this is like a huge reason, because some people argue, well, you could have made it Elseworlds, but overall, like with just everything, if you scrunch it up into a ball, they're just like, yeah, let's just leave this one and do a tax write-off, I suppose. But I would love to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What do you think about the summary? What do you think about the plot details that we went over in today's video? Bearing in mind that even with what we went over, we're probably still missing some other things that could, in the film's defense, made it seem a little bit better, I don't know. Or are you still like, no matter what, after what you've read out, that couldn't have been made much better, and I just wouldn't be interested in seeing it even if it did get released? Let me know any and all thoughts, guys. I hope you enjoyed this bit of a different video today. If you did, please leave a like on it. I'd really appreciate that. Do consider subscribing for more videos like this. Check out my previous video that I uploaded yesterday. It's a bit of a DC news roundup. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow people of the DCU in the next video. Goodbye.